everyone. Thank you for watching Get Response Live. Episode 183 about IconMap Pro. You see a lot of text below in the screen because we have James here. Hi, James. And we have Dennis also.
Hi.
A lot of hexagons. He will explain in a minute why that is. And we're going to be talking about IconMap Pro. How do you start with it? But also some nice new features and hexagons. So if you want to join the discussion, you can do so via the comments in LinkedIn or YouTube. If you want to say hello, that will be great because then you know who is watching. Otherwise, I don't know. We don't know. So please feel free to say hello in the comments. Someone is already doing that, I see. Paul, hey Paul. Nice that you're watching also. If you like these knowledge sharing, because everybody is doing that for free, then don't forget to, guys, like on YouTube or on LinkedIn. James, come on. Like the thumb. Yes, okay. Yeah, I will make a nice thumbnail out of that. That's cool. Hey, Brian is also watching. That's nice. Brian actually is also going to be a guest, I think, next month, right, Brian? So that's awesome that he's also joining. And Marjolein and Mark. And we have a couple of people who have an anonymous account setting on LinkedIn. But thank you for watching also. And yeah, nice. Thank you for saying goodbye. Oh, goodbye. Hello, sorry. 45 minutes, then we'll say goodbye. And if you want to subscribe, you can also do that. You see all the videos passing by. And in Power Up, our learning platform, you find all kinds of trainings about Power BI. So that's for the introduction. But let's get started. James, can I give you first a word to shortly introduce yourself to the viewers?
Yeah, of course. Hi, everyone. My name is James Dales. I'm based in the UK. Spent probably last 25 years or so in data consulting world, but as of April this year, I've left all that behind to turn something that I've been doing in my spare time for the last 6 or 7 years, which is building the IconMap visual into my full-time job. So I'm now full-time on IconMap Pro.
Wow, nice story, right? First you do it here in the evenings and in the weekends, and now you can make a living out of it. So that's
hopefully
great. Hopefully, sure. And Dennis, can you also shortly introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. Dennis Priester from the Netherlands. Live in a small town in the Netherlands near Rotterdam. In Delft, I had my studies in mechanical engineering, which is totally unrelated to what I do now. But it kind of got me into this field of, I would say, BI consulting about 15 years ago. I guess I started as a student doing a bit of Excel, etc. And then automated away my own job. And then all of a sudden, there was a lot of Excel. And then about 5 years ago, I stepped over to Power BI. And I think I'm self-employed for about 11 years, and I work together with Randy over the past 5 years in my own, real company now. So
it is a real company.
Yeah,
you shouldn't be modest about it. It is a company.
So plus one. So
nice. Now, great to have you both here. Where shall we start? Dennis, can I start with you? How did you discover maybe custom visuals like IconMap Pro? What brought you to that?
Now it's actually pretty long road, I would say. So if we just focus on the Power BI part, or maybe just a little bit before, also in Excel there's a lot of stuff you supposedly shouldn't or can't do, right? And at some point in life, I discovered I don't like that. So if there's something, especially when people say, no, you cannot do that, and not as in you're forbidden, but it's not possible in this thing, then I try to find a way to make it happen. And in Power BI, especially 5 years ago, like 60 iterations back, right, of Power BI updates, especially then you could do a lot less than now. If you would step in now in the Power BI world, you can do so much more than we could do 5 years ago. And you had to improvise a little bit. And even the simplest things like preventing a user to click on something and then that it brings it up onto something else. By now we can maintain the layer order. We couldn't do that, so you had to make a transparent button on top of it, for instance, that kind of stuff. Some people call it MacGyvering, I would say, but there's also a limit to what you can MacGyver in visuals, right? And then you have custom visuals, although I sometimes have the impression that most custom visuals out there just had one purpose, and then it was sort of like also nice to put it on the marketplace. But luckily also there's a lot of change over the past 5 years that there's more professional stuff out there. There's also a lot of paid stuff out there, but also free. There's a lot of good stuff amongst it. The IconMap visual of James.
Yeah, and because you actually joined our first Dashboard Duel competition end of last year, and you were the winner of that competition. Did that also help you?
Yes, actually a lot, but
yeah,
I think I needed some convincement, or how do you say that? Persuasion, maybe. So because normally I was just working 5-6 days a week for mostly corporates, like big companies, a lot of different reports, sales, innovation, supply chain, you name it. I think over the years 250 different-ish projects, something like that. And but in the end of the day, it starts to become more or less the same. Although it's my hobby, I could say it's a hobby, and then I think I'm lucky that my hobby is my work, and that I enjoy doing it. But something started to like itch, right? And then Marjolein convinced me, well, you just join, and it's a nice opportunity to also compare yourself with others, because that's also something. If you're like stuck in not stuck, but if you work in the same way all the time, so are you just the lunatic on the hill? Or are there other? How do you compare to others? How are you doing like that? Are there some skills missing, or can you sharpen some stuff? And
I shared your dashboard, so maybe you can walk us through it. One of these things that you challenged yourself with.
Well, actually, the first thing that convinced me to do it is that the fact that you do it for a good purpose as well, right? So that I love most of all. I think the challenge by far was actually not making the map, but it was not spending too much time in it, because that's the other side of the medallion. Once I started to do something like for me, right, which is a project for me, although it's for the community. Yeah, it kind of felt like some sort of additional freedom. I don't know if that makes sense. It was like, hey, I can spend time on this, and I can decide myself how much time I spend on it. And then it became so fun that, luckily the competition ended at some point. But I also had to work next to it, right? So,
can you show us some examples now? What you created?
So for instance, this is standard stuff what you can do with maps, but most people that used maps could quickly find out that they're rather limited, right? So you can do some bubble charting, you can maybe do some, not a lot. And when I found out the IconMap, I thought it would be nice if I could make a heat map, but there was no way really. And of course you could basically try out with these bubbles to sort of do conditional colors and do sort of a heat map there, or make them bigger or less. But I saw somewhere in some post at some point a heat map on a map, and I thought I want to do that in Power BI, and I couldn't. And then I spoke at some point to, I think I spoke to I don't know if I spoke to Paul already back then, but at least I learned about GeoJSONs. And GeoJSONs is some format that describe some shape in a map. But I had to upload it. Correct me if I'm wrong, James, but in the old version, you had to upload that GeoJSON, if you finally had it, to a Git or your own website, and then when it's hosted, you could show it in the visual. So that was a challenge. So GeoJSON, never done it. Hosting it in some place that was never done that. And then it was also rather static. Every time I had to change something, I had to upload a new file. That was kind of annoying because I said, well, it's a competition and I don't think it's enough. It needs to be sort of dynamic. So the next thing was the discovery of VKT or WKT, or what, I don't know what the abbreviation was for, but it's like another sort of definition about coordinates that make up shapes. And along the creation of this dashboard, I experimented heavily with ChatGPT. So I didn't know anything about ChatGPT at the time, but it helped me suggest, hey, maybe you try out WKT. And that resulted in quite a lot of coding, Power Query, docs, whatever. And then I got this thing. So that's one of the more complex things in this that led to all kinds of sub challenges.
Yeah. Now, what we'll discuss later is how that was also the beginning of the Hexagon journey. But before we go in there, James, I would want to give you the word to show us a little bit, because IconMap. When did you create this? What was the reason behind creating this? How did this journey start for you?
Yeah. So the background story goes back right to the beginning of Power BI, when not long after Power BI was launched, custom visuals came not long after. And back in my consulting life, I was being introduced to a number of customers by Microsoft who had geospatial requirements that really just weren't possible with maps. Like being able to put a picture of a plane on the map and see, where those planes are flying around was the first one I came across. And then other similar ones wanting to put icons on the map to show various statuses of things. So I ended up, right as soon as custom visuals were launched as a feature by Microsoft, by making a bespoke map for that customer that could do that. And that initial map had quite a high profile. It ended up being shown in the keynote at some pretty big Microsoft conferences in the US. And I think even Satya Nadella demoed it at one point. So it got seen by a lot of people. And then suddenly I became the person who did maps in Power BI. And I got introduced to a whole load more customers. But of course, all their requirements were completely different. And by the time I built 3 or 4 bespoke map visuals, it got to the point, well, let's just build a single custom visual that can satisfy as many of these requirements as possible. So I ended up building IconMap, launched it into AppSource. So this is now, well, I think the first version was about 6-7 years ago. It went into AppSource about 3 years ago. And then it's just grown in popularity over the years. I think last year it had about 150,000 downloads. And added to a crazy number of reports. But of course, that results in problems, right? Because this wasn't something I was doing as part of my job. It was something I did in the evenings and weekends when I had time. And with millions of users, I was getting so many support requests and requests for help every day. Quite a few from the people on this call. And I guess it became a victim of its own success. It was just more than it was possible to keep up with. I could easily spend 8 hours just doing support requests. And it meant that most people who contacted me, I just never had the time to even reply to them. And so I had to come up with a solution. And the solution was obviously to, Dean works for the organization where that first map was written for. So the solution was to leave the consulting job behind and turn it into the day job. So I started with another ex-colleague, Tekantis, with really the aim of being able to, massively improve what's possible with geospatial analytics, not just in Power BI, but we have plans for Microsoft Fabric as well.
Cool. Romero is asking, will it be someday a standard visual? Because now it's a custom visual. Who knows?
Romero. Who knows?
Nobody knows. But for the people who don't know it, James, can you maybe, I will add your screen, just the first steps and what you can do with it to introduce everyone to it?
Yeah, so let me give you a bit of an example. I'll go back to that. There's so many examples I want to show, but let's start with the real basics. So, firstly, let me cover how to get it. So it's in Microsoft App Source. So you just go to those three little dots, get more visuals, and there it is. Click add, and it adds it to your report. Now, Dennis described his journey of using GeoJSON, so custom shapes in a report, a bit like the old shape map. Well, can still do today, the visual that's still in preview. But in the old IconMap...
For 8 years now, I believe.
Yeah, exactly. The issue, and actually, if you've used the shape map, which obviously many people have, you'll know that preparing data to go in that shape map is a real pain. You end up downloading it from source. Quite often it's in the wrong coordinate formats. You have to convert it using something like QGIS or mapshaper.org. You have to simplify the polygons down because anything even slightly complicated crashed the visual. And there's a lot of work to do just to get it in Power BI. And then once you got it in Power BI, there were no background maps. So it was just the shapes on their own. Yep. So IconMaps, the old IconMap, solved that slightly. But as Dennis said, you had to still do all of that conversion work and then find somewhere public to host it. So that was one of the first goals I had with the commercial version, to make that process a lot easier. So just to show, I guess, that as a starting point, I've got some crime data here for the UK. So let me just create a really quick choropleth map. That's custom boundaries shaded based on the data. So I'm just going to drag in what's UK's local authority codes into the map visual, into the formatting options. So it defaults to circles. We're not going to do circles. We're going to do shapes from a file. And then we get quite a few configuration options. We can either create drill down maps or we can show multiple layers at the same time. But let's just stick with one layer to start with. So in the old visual, you could only source them from an external URL. But in the new version, we can upload the file. So click the button there. You can either drag the file in or click the button to choose it.
That has recently been added, James, that you can upload it.
Sorry?
Has that recently been added, that you can upload it instead of that you have
to host this has been in there since the beginning of the new visual, but it wasn't there in the old one.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm still amazed that you made all this stuff yourself, James.
Yeah.
You don't have a whole technical team behind you, right?
No. At the moment, it's only me doing the dev. So here we've got our custom shapes in there. So it's done that process. So this was in British National Grid coordinates. So it's converted it into longitudes and latitudes. And it simplified the file down so that it happily fits inside the Power BI report. And then it's simply a question of applying the conditional formatting. So I'll just choose my measure. We'll just have a simple gradient. And then it will shade all of those polygons based on the data. And we've got a really simple, quick choropleth map. I won't do it now, but we could add multiple levels and drill down into more and more detail. So super.
Brian is mentioning you also added a Power BI file next to it on the app source so that people can learn from it.
It's really worth downloading that file. So the one Brian's talking about is when you click on a visual, and for some reason most people miss this. There's this download sample button here. There are loads of different examples in that report to show you how to configure all of the different options.
Yeah, it's good that you mentioned it, Brian. People missed it. Yeah, cool. And so you can do shapes. What other things can you do? Icons, I assume.
Yeah. So shall I show you a couple of examples?
please.
I'll leave hexagons for the moment.
The icon map cannot do icons, unfortunately. Yeah.
Well, it can do icons.
No, I know.
It can do icons.
Would be funny.
Well, let me show you some features. Let's do this one. I'm just going to bring in a web browser. So I guess one of the core features is the ability to draw lines. So these are all the airline routes that every airline in the world flies. So KLM.
Yep.
There we go. They're all the routes that KLM flies, but I can just pick any airline and it will plot those routes. Now with lines, and this is key thing with all the features of IconMap Pro, is everything's conditionally formatted. So you can change, well, lines can be straight, they can be curved, or they can follow the curvature of the Earth. You can change, with conditional formatting, the color, the transparency, the thickness, the pattern, so you can have a dash pattern. You can animate that dash pattern. So if you want to animate lines to show direction, you can draw arrows on them and you can draw text on them. So loads of different options for drawing lines.
Yeah. You can even make WKT lines. I mean, I used it in the context actually. So I put it on the screen quickly, maybe.
Yeah, I'll add it.
You can then switch back. Like these are also lines, right? The only downside with this is in James' example, you just have probably a starting point and an ending point. And this one has a series of coordinates that you have to create your own WKT for, right? And then, but then again, this is not the IconMap Pro, but there still, you just go to, I mean, I added an ID of the thing. And then in objects, I just added one field value, which is the WKT thingy, and that's it. The map does the rest, right? It's not there's nothing. I mean, that's what IconMap does. You just have to define what you want to show, but in the end, how it's shown and how fast it's shown, that's all attribute to James, right?
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, nice that you jump in with that nice example also, Dennis. So this was also for the Dashboard Duel, because it was about picking litter from the street. So these were the routes that this guy walked through his neighborhood to pick up litter. Yeah, nice. I'll come back to your screen. Yeah, it's a lot of screen. Oh, here you see also the airplane. Hey, so yeah, this is animating.
So this is live real data from a. So in my attic above me, I've got a Raspberry Pi with a transmitter or antenna attached to it. So as the planes are flying around above my house, I'm picking up all of their transponder signals and feeding it through into Microsoft Fabric, and then this Power BI report is refreshing every 5 seconds and showing the latest locations of all of the planes. So this is an example of putting images on the map. So images can be dynamic. Again, you can have different pictures. So you've got different types of picture here for different types of aircraft. There's a helicopter there. You can change the size and you can rotate the images around. So in this case, obviously, they're all pointing in the direction of travel. And then a bit like in Dennis's example that he just shown, I'm also dynamically generating those line strings. So we get the last 30 minutes worth of travel history of those planes as well. And I've added a little label on there as well. So where we've got them, you can see the flight number. So there's an EasyJet flight there, for example, flying
Is that just a standard option as well on the line that you just add the label?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right, awesome.
Yeah, you can add labels to shapes, to lines, to pretty circles. Also,
but it just shows how much more you can do with maps, like you showed in the beginning, Dennis, the bubbles. There's so much more to discover with the map visuals like this. Much more insight you can get. Yeah.
And then I guess similar, we'll stick with the Netherlands, go back to the Netherlands. I thought it'd be quite nice to have a little example of the railway network in the Netherlands. So I actually built an example that allows you to choose any rail operator in Europe. So I've got all of the railway network for all of Europe loaded in here. And then all of the track is there in blue with the stations overlaid in green with fictional colouring for KPIs, but then you can pick particular routes.
Yeah.
I'll just pick one at random. And then it zooms in and also includes with those labels the station names. And then we can do things like...
That's where I'm located in Amersfoort, so that's a nice example. Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Picked one at random.
Yeah.
And then we can change, that's a bit difficult to see on that route, but we can change the thickness of the lines then to do things like representing, you know, the different speeds, so the high-speed lines are then shown in blue, or change the colour based on the network or whether they're electrified.
So you can all do that in the backend, like in the settings that you just showed.
Yeah,
you can all define it.
And it's all conditional formatting, so you can change it all dynamically on the fly.
Yeah. How did you learn this, Dennis? Because you also applied it. But how is it? Just is it straightforward, or did you watch
learning
videos,
IconMap basically?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not an IconMap expert, right? I just use it for a couple of things because there's so much more. For instance, I never tried to drill down thingy, but
how did you learn it?
The download sample, yeah, that's the first thing you went to, and then also ChatGPT knew about it already, so it gave me some suggestions. Awfully wrong sometimes in the beginning, but nowadays it's a lot better already. So yeah, I mean, in some cases you need to know a little bit more of the inner workings, right? But not the background workings really. There's of course there's options that you need to know if you want to do more advanced stuff, I would say. But the principle, the basis of it, and the conditional formatting is always pretty straightforward.
All right. We have 2 questions from the people that watch, and I always want to include those, of course, because I always appreciate it if people ask questions. So Edwin asks, okay, how much faster is uploading versus hosting the GeoJSON file? Is there a performance benefit maybe?
Well, it's probably actually faster performing to host it online, because if you're storing it locally inside the file, it has to, every time you're editing your report, it ends up sending that file backwards and forwards, because the only place as a report, as a visual designer, I have to store it is actually in the visual properties. So it gets stored in a hidden field. But you've got to weigh that up with the advantage of being able to keep that file private, you know, so if it's... And it's a real pain to configure external hosting.
Yeah, it was a real pain. And also, you can use it offline. If the hosting is interrupted or something, it still works, right? So...
Yeah. Another question from Sander. Are there any plans to get the visual certified? Because apparently not yet, because in his organization they are not allowed to use non-certified visuals. How is that? Is that something you're working on?
So, because this is what everybody asks pretty much every large organization. It's the first question. So, unfortunately, the criteria for Microsoft to certify a visual is that it's not allowed to talk to the outside world outside of the visual itself. Now, unfortunately, obviously, the key thing about maps is you have the map background, and we created this particular map background, and it's based on at least 2 terabytes worth of disk space. So there's no way you could have that held inside of the visual, so it has to go outside to talk to external servers. And of course, you might want to bring in things like external icons or external files, or talk to ArcGIS or GeoServer or whatever.
All kinds of different map backgrounds that you can choose, right? Also, like different map servers, etc. You can choose.
Yeah, absolutely. So whilst we've got, so that was another thing with the old IconMap. We were reliant on OpenStreetMap's servers, which aren't really supposed to be used for production solutions. So you were reliant on also having to get a Mapbox subscription and using Mapbox for the background maps. So obviously when we produced our own map, we wanted to make sure that we had our own background map service. So we've got loads of different styles available.
Nice.
But you can also use, as long as you've got an API key, you can use Azure Maps, you can use Esri's ArcGIS Maps, Mapbox, Google Maps, MapTiler, and custom backgrounds as well.
It's really an all-in-one solution. Hey, you can use also the different sources.
I got a question on oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to touch one last thing on the certification though, because
and then we're going to continue with the hexagons.
Then we'll go to hexagons. Yeah, I just want to say on there, because it is something that everybody raises. What we're happy to do for big organizations is share the source code under an NDA so that your security teams can go through and satisfy themselves that you know that it isn't doing anything malicious. And we can also provide a bespoke version of the visual that, using a Microsoft feature in the Visuals API, locks it down so it can only talk to specific URLs. So it can only talk to your own background server, for example. And we've got a white paper that goes into that in detail on the website.
Great. Now people can read that and contact you if needed. So Sander, thank you for your question. I want to continue because we are running through the time and you have so many interesting things to share. Can you shortly share your story about the hexagons then? Because you were working on, I think, on another challenge. And
so
why did you choose hexagons?
Well, first I got these squares. And I was very content with myself, and then even more content that I won. And then I think it was Paul, please correct me, that in his first message after the contest, like, yeah, it's nice. And then we spoke, and then his first, but why didn't you choose hexagons or something in that sense? It wasn't sort of a negative comments like, did you consider and the H3 system? And I was like, no, what's the H3 system? I did consider hexagons, to be honest, but I mean, that seems really complex, right? But then his comment is like, no shit. Now he said hexagons are better, but I have squares. So I might need to revisit that, right? So resolving that is actually, so therefore I need to show you just one thing about this thing, is that in the end, this is a WKT representation. Again, every square is sort of an object, right? And I had to create sort of a table that hosts this stuff and calculates all of these things row by row. In the end, the representation of that particular thing and show it in this map. So I thought, indeed, Paul, you mentioned the benefit of the hexagon is indeed that you keep the geography constant, that the distance between, well, this one and the one that's top left is like different than the distance between these two. But the hexagon ones is in fact sort of the similar problem than squares. You just have to define how does a square look and how do you need to place them, right? So if we just get rid of the thing that I have on screen and put something else on screen, then I managed after some iterations to get at least some hexagons on my map, but the principle is still the same. It's like a WKT is generated, but in this case, it generates for each coordinate basically of the hexagon, and then for each of them around sort of a center of a hexagon. So if there's a point here, I determined, well, where are the other 6 points, and then you can basically make all of these individual shapes. But to do that wasn't that straightforward. And in fact, when I created this one, only then I found out that the method I was using was rather stupid and not very suitable for dynamic placement anywhere. And that's because I lacked theory, and theory on this is remarkably sparse, or at least what I could find. And I mean, I'm not going to discuss it, but basically, if you ever want to find out, there's a lot in my articles, but most of the real theory about hexagons comes from this website, Red Blob Games. So this guy, I mean, without this website, I think I stopped at some point because the rabbit hole got too deep. So I really had to study more or less how this worked. And then how can I translate that into Power Query and docs, and how can I manage to generate these hexagons? And and that kind of spiraled further out of control, because then at some point, it's like, hey, this is a nice version, but now you dive further down some details, and you basically get the same at some point. Okay, what's the data of the Dashboard Duel with hexagons? So this was iteration 10, and totally replaced all of the code I had. But in fact, finally, I had a connection here between actual hexagons filling the data and then the data that you have on the map. So I didn't put it in the actual report, but the principle works the same. And you can basically choose the level of it. You can, it's a lot more flexible. But to do this again, the how do you say it?
Well-known text, WKT.
Yeah, the WKT thing is showing it wasn't the difficulty anymore already for a long time, because that was like IconMap. I was just using the IconMap as a sort of the container where I was doing the developments for. I mean, I didn't have to worry about IconMap and showing it. The only problem I had was making the right definitions and then connecting actually these hexagons back to the data that I had. And that, well, I have this large series of articles, or at least I find it a quite large series of articles. It took me way too much time, but it was also sort of descriptive. So if you ever feel the need to waste your time, then you can
No, I don't think
go
people
through
will waste
it.
their time, because it's a nice journey, and some people are already
Yeah, but
asking
it's
where
like
can they
also
find information.
true.
So here it is
If
that
it's
they find
if it's
information.
your point of interest.
Yeah.
But other than that, if you just want to, and I mean, if you just want to plot some hexagons, then don't do this. I mean, if you want to know how this could be done, maybe without IconMap Pro, then you should do this, right?
Yeah.
So this for me was sort of, I would say, even therapeutic. What is how you say it? Therapeutic. Another thing, like you write down the stuff you're doing, because otherwise you get nuts and then you get lost, and then at some point it helped.
So you did a whole series indeed. I remember that in 7 or 8 articles, how you went from the first step to the step number 10.
And then there's one thing linked that one link that I had on this. I think I have it open still here as well. It's on my on our website that I hosted. So that's this here. Let me see. Not here. This one. Right. So he showed me the planes, or not the planes. This is the thing. So this is car data with hexagons at some point, because then you get like, okay, now I got hexagons. What can I do with it? So this is my own car. For 4 or 5 years, I happen to have a GPS tracker, and then, I mean, challenges don't stop, because I think I discussed this with James at some point. As in, but I have now all these hexagons at points where I have data, but I don't have any hexagons for points where I don't have data, right? So then the Netherlands would just be empty, and only the points with data had hexagons. So I said, maybe we can add a background, and maybe he's working on that or has it in the backlog, but I couldn't wait for it. So, okay, now how am I going to do this? So you always have a next challenge. And
and then James picked it up. He said, challenge accepted, I read. So what did you do then, James? Because you said
so I saw Dennis's articles, and I was just immensely impressed at just how clever what he was doing was, but it was so complicated. There was no way that I was even going to be able to attempt to reproduce it. So I thought there has to be an easier way. So I ended up building H3 into IconMap Pro that I was developing at the time that Dennis's articles had come out. So let me show you this very quickly, because I'm conscious of the time. So this is just point data. This is number of crimes in London at quite a granular level, but it's just circles, it's just bubbles. Note though that we actually get them cut off there. So I'm going to increase beyond the 30,000 row limit just to make sure we get all the data, because when you're producing these hexagons, there's often quite a lot of source data that you want to represent. And then, so this is just usual map configuration, longitude and latitude and circle size. I'm going to drag circle size onto heat map weight, and then turn off circles and turn on H3. And hopefully.
Almost.
What have I forgotten? Oh, live demo
Field
mode.
rule.
I put it in. I put it in heat map. You need to put it in H3 weight. Phew.
Too many features.
We get H3 hexagons appear, and then obviously we get quite large hexagons, but that's because we can change the resolution. So if we want to go detailed, we can just change that number, and we can very, very quickly also do things like add a field parameter on there and bind that conditionally to the parameter. So let me pick that field. And then we can use the slicer to change the size of the hexagons as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's,
Cool.
you know, it doesn't get much quicker than that to produce the hexagons.
Nice.
So that's one way of producing them.
Yeah.
But there's quite a lot of data sets now being released already in this hexagon format. So rather than having to generate them from longitudes and latitudes, the data sets are actually being provided in that format. So I found one a few minutes ago that has population density for the Netherlands, and it's just 2 columns. So each of those hexagons has a unique ID. Wherever it is in the world, in whatever level of detail, it has this hex code.
So there is a global definition of hexagons.
Yeah.
With all their unique ID.
So we can also use those super quickly to create a hexagon map. So I'll put this in the right field this time.
We learn something new every week. Eh? I never knew that there were uniquely ID'd hexagons.
And then rather than basing it on longitudes and latitudes, we just base it on that ID. We'll get some horrible colors in here, unless I very quickly set the formatting. Let's go white to blue again. That one. And then let me zoom in. And then we get for the whole, and actually I need to go past the 30,000 rows again, just to make sure we get complete coverage. Let's go 120,000 should be plenty. And then we should get complete coverage. There's some little islands included in there as well, which is why it's zooming right out. But there we go, complete population density map in just a few seconds for the whole of the Netherlands.
Cool.
Based on tens of thousands of rows of data.
Yeah. That's awesome. Very straightforward, and gives a lot better value than the dots and even the squares that Dennis showed. We have a couple of minutes left, but I still want to give you some time to maybe give some premieres of some new features that you maybe are working on. Can you share a couple of new features?
So there's so much I haven't shown, but it would be good to show some stuff that's not there yet, we're working on at the moment.
Yeah, please.
There is a couple of examples. So what I've got here, let's pick somewhere a little bit hilly. I'm going to zoom into the Lake District. It doesn't really matter where. So I've overlaid on here some flood data. So it shows potential flooding, which isn't anything new in itself. But what we want to be able to do is introduce 3D maps. So we can tilt the map down and see the landscape. And then also, let that update, add on things like 3D buildings. So, you can really start to see the impact of that floodplain on the 3D landscape and see, which individual buildings are then submerged under the water.
Yeah.
And then the other thing we can do with that is, if you remember, I showed the plains data earlier. Now, of course, what we had before was just that top-down view. But assuming this is going to work. Here we go. So this is showing the last day's worth of travel, again, over the house, but we can tilt the map around now and see that in 3D. So you can really start to see the different layers that are going on in there. So you see the planes coming down.
How much data is that anyway?
Sorry?
How much data is that anyway?
It's based on, I think, a couple of million rows of data in 3D, and then reduced down into line strings. So IconMap Pro supports 180,000 rows of data. I'm in the process of trying to increase that up towards 1 million. But if you've got loads and loads of aircraft points, you can turn them into a line string. So instead of having, 2 billion points, you can reduce it down to 100,000 lines and then display all of those in the visual. So working on performance and working on 3D is probably...
One of the viewers is asking, will it work with OS data? Not saying anything to me, but
I don't see why not.
What is OS data for the people?
So OS
who don't know?
in the UK, the national the company that makes all the UK maps is called Ordnance Survey, so related to OS.
Yeah. Great. Is this the first time you're showing this to people?
Oh, well, apart from a slight little tease yesterday, I think you could call it a.
Can I use my my thingy?
I think
because this was a
world premiere.
Cool, right? Finally, I can use it again. Nice. James and Dennis, thank you very much for sharing all these cool things. And I think you inspired a lot of people. I see a lot of comments of people that are loving these features and sharing information. So yeah, thank you all for joining the discussion, because it's always nice to see that people like it. Will that hex light behind you become merchandise? Because it's a nice lamp indeed. Yeah, it's a lamp, and now I see it also. I didn't notice that it was a lamp. Yeah.
Great idea.
Light. Cool. Thank you both for joining us and sharing all of this, because it's very fun to watch, and it's really inspiring to see that you stepped this up from a hobby, both of you basically, to really a serious thing that you share about on LinkedIn. So follow both Dennis and James on LinkedIn. I think that's the best way to learn more where you can find all these things. And thank you also for watching, for Brian. And indeed, you will be my guest in next month. But next week we are also, of course, back, and then we are talking about AI. And I'm going to be joined by Olaf Lemmens. He's also very actively sharing on LinkedIn. So if you are interested in AI and really the practical use today, then follow Olaf, because he shares every day something new. And we're going to be discussing 5. It can also be 4 or 6. I don't know. 5 is a nice number. AI solutions that you can use for BI, for productivity today. Because we sometimes get tired of all the messages about new AI stuff, but we're gonna bring it back to what you can use today, and some actual use cases that Olaf himself also uses. So now Jim is a new fan of IconMap, I think. It's the first time we saw a demo, so that's cool. So we can add him. Thank you everyone for watching again, and have a nice day, and maybe see you next week. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.